Hello, guys, and welcome back to Through the Trapdoor. I'm Emily.
And I'm Katie.
And this is our podcast where we read you Harry Potter fan fiction.
And we're about to start our next chapter story.
This one's supposed to be like 20 chapters long, so we're going to try to condense it a little bit. We'll see.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
We will.
So we also still want to keep the chapters like 30-ish minutes.
Right. Because that's like the perfect commute length.
Yeah.
But on an exciting note, we have a new review.
I'm so excited.
Yes, it is from Tori. It's on iTunes. The subject is "The best part of waking up is Katie and Emily."
That's adorable.
And I'm like super thrilled. She said this podcast is amazing. Emily and Katie are hilarious together, and the fanfic they pick is great. Perfect for anybody who loves Harry Potter.
Oh, love it.
I love it. We love you.
We love you, Tori.
Thank you so much for listening to us.
Anybody else loves listening to us, you should also go write us a review and we'll read it on here.
Yes, just like we just did with Tori's.
We love reviews.
We love you.
All right, so this is called The Staff of Ornkey, and it was written in October 2000.
So it's from The Gap.
Yeah, the author started it in October 2000, so we'll see. We'll see how this goes. I'm kind of excited to see, like, how they predict everything.
I know, I love the craziness that came out of The Gap.
Some of it is just, like, mind-blowing. All right. Chapter 1, A Cold Beginning. A chilly wind blew down out of the churning, dark sky across the small station. It was the dreariest September 1st that Harry had ever seen since he began at Hogwarts 5 Septembers ago. The students all had to brace themselves as they were pounded by the relentless wind and rain. An early winter. Hermione looked around nervously to see if the luggage had already been taken in, worrying about Crookshanks in his basket.
Well, we already know one thing they predicted. The weather when they arrived 5th year.
Yeah, that's pretty spot on.
Yep.
It was with numb fingers and rattling teeth they entered through the main doors. Peeves greeted them from inside as perhaps the weather was too much for even him. "Harry Potter," said Peeves, doing a somersault, Professor Snape's favorite student. "Have we a surprise for you?" "Go away," Harry said drearily. He was wet, cold, and Professor Snape was the last person he wanted mentioned. "Go bother the first years," Ron suggested. My, and Peeves clapped his hands together. "You'll be delighted too, double the trouble." With that, he flew off down the corridor, and Harry and Ron didn't give him another thought as they entered the warmth of the Great Hall. They all sat down at the Gryffindor table. The torches had been lit along with the candles in the great candelabras at the center of the tables. The ceilings above reflected the black, swirling storm clouds outside. "I can't believe that the summer is over," Ron contemplated, looking up at the ceiling. "September is still summer, Ron," Hermione piped up. "Fall does not begin until September 22nd.
Of course you would know that, Hermione. Of course.
Ron turned to Harry and made a face, then turned his attention to the steaming butterbeer that had suddenly appeared before them. "How very nice of the house elves," he commented with an eye on Hermione. I feel like I just made Ron sound like a sassy teenage girl.
You did, but it's fine.
"I hope you two aren't going to be as bad as last year," Harry said, picking up his own mug. Suddenly, the bench they were seated on gave a jolt as Fred and George slid quickly onto it. Ron's butterbeer sloshed onto his robes. "Aw, look what you did," Ron said, dabbing his robes with a napkin. "This better wash out."
Magic! You have magic. This is a problem in which magic can solve, and now that you're back at school, you can use it.
Yeah. You know how you go to a magical school? Yeah. Why do they always forget that they can just use magic for things?
I don't know, because it even happened in the regular books.
Yeah, all the time.
Like, when they would break ink bottles, they'd, like, blot it with napkins. And I'm like, you've got magic.
Just make it go away.
Magic.
You won't believe it, George blurted out, completely ignoring his younger brother's complaints. We didn't believe it ourselves, Fred added. Unless you fed Malfoy a canary cream, I don't care, Ron said, still perturbed. No, it's not funny. It's bad, actually, George began. Really bad, Fred continued. But feeding Malfoy a canary cream isn't a bad idea.
Ugh, I love the twins.
It's about Snape, George said, interrupting. Harry lifted his eyebrows as he continued to drink his butterbeer. It was warming him up so well that he didn't want to put his mug down. We heard Professor Dumbledore talking about the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, continued Fred. Said they had a hard time finding one for this year. It's Snape, George exclaimed. Yeah, I think he finally got the job. Harry suddenly gagged on his butterbeer and found himself in the same predicament as Ron.
Which, again, can be solved easily with magic.
Yep. Not a predicament. Snape? No, Harry moaned. I can't believe that Dumbledore would let him. Harry had to agree with Hermione. Somehow he found it hard to believe that Dumbledore would let an ex-Death Eater take over Defense Against the Dark Arts. But then again, maybe Dumbledore saw Snape's past experience as an advantage. Voldemort was back in power, and who better to teach defense against a Death Eater than one who used to be one himself? Still, this was bad news. Suppose we won't be looking forward to Defense Against the Dark Arts anymore, said Harry as the doors opened at the end of the Great Hall, and Hagrid and Professor McGonagall led in the shivering, wet first years. Wonder who's going to teach potions, Ron thought out loud. They looked up at the staff table, where there were 4 empty chairs, 2 belonging to Hagrid and McGonagall, 1 belonging to Snape. He seemed to be missing. The 4th had to be the new potions master. The sorting had already begun. They turned their attention to the sorting hat, applauding every time a new Gryffindor stood up from the 4-legged stool and joined their table. Ron, Harry, Hermione suddenly hissed. They looked in the direction she was pointing. The great doors had opened, once again admitting 2 figures. After the doors shut, they walked briskly across the gray stone floor. One of the approaching wizards was unmistakable. Greasy, shoulder-length, black hair, shallow skin, hooked nose. Professor Severus Snape, the most hated professor of the school. He was wearing deep green robes, his hallmark black cloak swooshing ominously as he walked.
What? Snape has never worn any color other than black.
True. Usually seen alone, glaring at students or his fellow professors, he was surprisingly in deep conversation with the wizard who had entered the hall with him. No one had ever seen the tall, thin wizard before. To begin with, he was remarkably younger. He probably was not more than 20. His hair was thick, jet black, tied back into a ponytail that fell down past his waist. It was bound with several big silver rings and might have been admittedly impressive if not so incredibly greasy. He was slightly pale, but yet, standing next to Snape, he was somewhat handsome. His robes were black, with silver knotwork trim, and his cloak was extraordinary. It was blood red and trimmed heavily around the collar with thick gray fur. A silver serpent served as a clasp. He seated himself at the staff table next to Snape and began to examine the goblet and hollowware set before him, all while nodding at what Snape was saying. It was then that they noticed something even more interesting about the stranger, other than his long hair or lavish robes. He held in his long, thin fingers an odd type of staff. Oh my, Hermione was the first to comment on it. I'd never thought I'd see it. I mean, it's not supposed to exist anymore. What is it? Both Ron and Harry asked, though they were all staring at the staff, which had a stone fastened to the top that seemed to be putting off a soft blue glow. He's got the Mage's Staff of Ornkey. Huh? Was Ron's response. What's a Mage's Staff? Asked Harry. Well, it's like a wand, Hermione explained, but much more powerful. It doesn't require you to use words. There have only ever been a few made in history. Sounds great, said Ron. Great for charms class, I bet. Where can I get one?
All right, Ron. First of all, I love you, but your family's kind of poor. Even if you could get one, you wouldn't be able to afford one.
Yep. Also, you literally know nothing about them. So, what if it's horrible?
I'm sure it is. Oh, I think Hermione's going to explain it to us.
Well, of course. Did you expect anything else?
No, I really didn't.
You wouldn't want one, Hermione stated quickly. They tend to kill most of those who try to use one. And that's why so many of those made have been destroyed. That and the fact once you successfully use a Mage's Staff, you're bound to it for life. They were seen as too much of a burden. It was a mark of someone with extremely powerful magic up through the 17th century. By the 1700s, there weren't that many left, and the idea of completely dedicating your life to magic became a little absurd. As a master of a mage's staff, you can't get married. The type of power that it creates in your body is just so strong that it would affect any children they had. The children wouldn't be able to survive unless the staff was immediately given to them. Even then, it might kill them. Also, the only way to get one is to be apprenticed to a wizard who was one and then passed it down. The only exception is to make one, which is impossible now because the Philosopher's Stone is needed. One of the components of the crystal of the staff is the elixir of life. Sounds like a dull life, said Ron. So that staff, where did it come from? How many are there? There were 7 made. The only one left is supposedly in Gringotts, and that one was made in Russia. The Staff of Ornkey was made by Merlin up in the Ornkey Isles. Hermione, Ron explained, can you be any more brainy? How do you know all of this? From Muggle studies, she said simply. In the Muggle world, wizards are usually known with a staff and not a wand, and it's because of the traditional image of Merlin. There was a side note about the staffs in our text. Ron rolled his eyes. Wow, did you notice that, Professor? Neville Longbottom asked suddenly. No, Neville, we haven't, Ron said sarcastically.
I like that. That's like book Ron. That is straight up sassafras book Ron. I love it.
And Neville. Both very accurate.
Yeah, both are straight up canon, and I love it.
We were talking about his staff, Harry said more kindly. Neville's eyes widened. Is that a real wizarding staff, Harry? Why the fuck would Harry know?
I know. Well, I think because Harry's the one who's always nice to him, but Hermione's usually nice to him.
Yeah.
But Ron just sassed the crap out of him.
Hermione seems to think so. Oh, Neville whispered. They all noticed that Neville had turned deathly pale. What's wrong? Hermione slowly asked. Neville gulped. What's the chance of there being two wizards with wizarding staffs? The question took them all by surprise, but they didn't have time to answer it, for the Sorting Hat had completed its job for the year, and Professor Dumbledore had stood up. The beginning, he said, of another year. His voice, Harry noticed, had slightly taken on a raspy tone of an old man. May I begin by saying that I have great faith in all of you. Dumbledore's eyes seemed to twinkle as he scanned the sea of young faces. It vanished, however, when his gaze fell upon Draco Malfoy and the Slytherin table.
Ha! Even Dumbledore hates you.
Rude.
I'm sorry. Not you. I was more referring to Malfoy.
I knew what you meant.
Not you.
Last year was a very difficult year for many of us, and I wish that I could say that this year was going to be easier, but I don't think it will. Troubled times are dawning, and it will not go away quickly or easily. There were numerous murders all over the summer, both Muggle and Wizard. Though the papers failed to say, these were in fact linked to Voldemort. One paper in particular went so far as to blame a string of Muggle murders on Sirius Black. Harry saw that Dumbledore's eyes had met his, and he wished more than ever he didn't have to spend his summer months so cut off and distant from the wizarding world. Those allegations were false. Others and I have been laboring hard these past 2 months on following Voldemort's trail. It pains me to tell you this, but I must. There may come a time in the future when you must make some important decisions. It may even be a decision that involves going against authority. There will not always be someone to guide you. You must base your decision upon what you have learned here, and most importantly, what you feel is right. Always seek the truth. I may not always be there to give it to you. Dumbledore paused, again surveying all of the students, but this time with a more solemn expression. He looked down, removing his spectacles, massaged the bridge of his crooked nose. Then when he replaced his glasses, his face looked brighter. On a more positive note, Quidditch games will resume this year, and we have a new professor, very skilled in Quidditch, I might add, who I will introduce you to shortly, that will be overseeing the duties of Madam Hooch until she returns in the spring term. Harry quickly exchanged glances with Fred and George. That brings me to an introduction. Dumbledore continued, we have yet another defense against the dark arts professor. The stranger broke into a slight smile at this. Your new professor has come all the way from Durmstrang, and it seems that he has brought the weather with him. Professor Salazar Snape will be your new, but Dumbledore was drowned out by the enormous applause from the Slytherin table. Harry watched as Draco Malfoy banged his goblet on the table, then stood up. The other Slytherins filed suit. All right, we're on to chapter 2.
Woo!
Wyverns. We've got owls this year. Hermione was nearly sobbing. How are we going to do well if we've got this Snape family taking over our classes? Harry ignored Hermione's complaint. He had something much more important on his mind. He's taking over Quidditch. Dumbledore put a Slytherin in charge of Quidditch, Fred quoted. The thought was crushing. With a name like Salazar Snape, it was quite obvious that the new professor would favor the Slytherins. What this meant for the Quidditch matches, this was worse news for Harry than Voldemort. 2 Snapes, Ron moaned. How could there even be possibly 2 gets like that on the planet at this school? What was Dumbledore thinking? Maybe he's a bit loony. Neville Longbottom looked as if he was about to faint. Harry could only imagine how the idea of 2 Snapes was going to affect poor Neville. All the Gryffindor students seemed to be conversing on the same topic. No one was happy, and the things didn't look any brighter when they had all received their course schedules the next morning. Double potions in the morning and then defense against the dark arts in the afternoon the same day, Harry exclaimed upon getting his. Looks like we won't ever be able to look forward to Fridays, said Ron dismally. At least we won't have to see either of them again until the end of the week. Only look, Hermione was going over her schedule as well. Defense against the dark arts is on Mondays too. Neville made a small sniffling noise. His schedule was crumpled in his hand. "What's the matter?" Hermione asked. "Went to Professor McGonagall." Neville's voice had an uncharacteristic hint of anger to it. "Tried to drop Defense Against the Dark Arts. She wouldn't let me do it. She said that it was a 7-year requirement." After breakfast, they all went up to Professor Trelawney's tower for divination, and Harry and Ron were able to doze off for a pleasant nap until they were interrupted. Professor Trelawney loomed above them, her thin face looking very displeased, and her bangled arms crossed in front of her chest. They were all too happy to leave her stuffy, scented classroom and go outside for the next class, Care of Magical Creatures. Harry was looking forward to seeing Hagrid. He hoped that he would have a chance to talk to him since there was a 2-hour break before Transfiguration in the afternoon. As they walked down the green lawn, they came upon another group of students who were joining the class. The Slytherins were all walking closely together in their usual pack, listening to the drawling voice of Draco Malfoy.
Oh, Draco.
"No, Pansy. He's not Professor Snape's brother. They're cousins. I should know. He and my father are good friends. He was over at our house not long ago, and wouldn't you like to know some of the spells he taught me?" "Like what?" Pansy Parkins asked. "He's well versed in the things not taught here, and he's just wicked at Transfiguration," Malfoy explained. I really love my Malfoy voice.
I know. I'm like living for it right now.
I don't know where it's coming from.
But it's beautiful, and I need you to continue.
"He's one of the few animagi of the century, but he's the only wizard ever to be known for turning into a dragon besides Merlin. Well, not exactly a dragon, but close." Just want you to know that I'm doing some hand motions with it.
Like full on posh. Hey, I love it. It's amazing. It's beautiful, and it's so good.
I really like that we've read other stories with Malfoy in them, and this is the only story that Malfoy has had his own voice.
And I think he's gonna forever have this voice.
Probably.
Just like I think I'm probably gonna forever turn Harry into a sassy teenage girl.
I mean, that's just who he is now. I don't feel like it's appropriate for this story, but
We'll see what happens.
We'll see. "Maybe he should teach Transfiguration," someone suggested. "No," Malfoy disagreed. "He used to teach at Durmstrang, and they teach the dark arts over there. Not this defense crap. He's going to be the best professor we have had yet." "How come then?" Pansy said. "Why do you think Dumbledore had him come here then?" Malfoy threw his hands up in the air. "Don't ask me. Dumbledore's crazy."
Fact.
"Sounds like Defense Against the Dark Arts is going to be a real joy," Ron said sarcastically. I feel like they should be more excited. Like, yes, it's Snape's cousin, but he used to teach dark arts. He'll probably be really good at teaching Defense Against the Dark Arts.
Right, but I can also see where they're like, well, he's Snape's cousin. He's going to be just like him. This is going to suck.
Yes. "He assigned a lot of summer reading," Harry commented. "I didn't finish it all." "Neither did I," Ron confessed. Hermione tutted. "Oh, look who it is," a grating, drawling voice said from the Slytherin crowd. "Hope this year's better for you, Potter. Hope you don't get anyone else killed." "Shut up, Malfoy!" Ron barked. Both Harry and Hermione instinctively grabbed a hold of him. "Oh yes, Weasel. The muggle-loving pauper. My father's got a score to set with your family. He wasn't very happy about the hex you used on me." "Is your father coming then? Or how about your mother?" Ron interrupted. "No, you can't win against us, so you've got to run to Mommy and Daddy."
Yes, I love this sassafras, Ron.
It's so great. "Why not go to my father?" Malfoy took on a malevolent look that showed that he was evidently pleased with whatever he was about to say. At least my father doesn't have to hide behind Dumbledore's beard. My father's a real wizard, not some muggle-loving nitwit. Mine could beat yours in a duel any day, especially now. Hermione let out a laugh. I'd watch it, Malfoy. Your father goes slithering around with a big snake, as I understand it. And you know what snakes like to eat? Rodents, Malfoy. And I'm sure they would find a little ferret like you an appetizing snack.
Oh, burn. Malfoy, you just got burned.
It was so sassy. Malfoy looked as if he was attempting to sort out this statement, but gave up and hissed. Watch it yourself, Mudblood. You'll be lucky to make it through the year. What's that supposed to mean? Ron said rapidly. Don't you dare threaten her, you slimy little... Hey now, this isn't the way to start the year. It was Hagrid, and just in time, Ron and Malfoy had to back down. Hagrid set down a large crate that soon gained everyone's attention. It was smoking, and sounded as if something was scratching around inside. Not more blast-ended scroots, Dean Thomas exclaimed, as a distinct small explosion was heard, and fire filtered out of the holes in the crate. Nope, Hagrid replied. Those are gone now. What I've got here is something that I thought you would all like a bit more. Had to look all over a number of dungeons for these. Wonderful, Malfoy drawled. How many poisonous spikes does this thing have? You should know, Ron interjected. Sounds like he found them in your house. None, Hagrid replied simply, but they can burn you, so you have to be careful. I'll not have any of you touching them quite yet. I'm still reading up on them. So what exactly is in there? Harry asked warily, getting ready to run as Hagrid began unlocking the box. They're wyverns. Immediately, both Hermione and Malfoy stepped back. What, Malfoy? You really do have those in your basement, Ron jeered as he too retreated. Shut up, Ron. At least I have a basement. Harry decided to retreat quite a distance. He didn't want to be near anything that could be found lurking in the Malfoy dungeons. What's a wyvern? He asked Hermione. They're a type of dragon, she explained. Dragons? Hagrid, Harry began. Hagrid grinned as he stuck a gloved hand into the crate. Something that Harry would not have personally done, even with dragon hide gloves on. It's all right, Harry. Oh, now there's a right little fella. No need to try and defend yourself against me. Hagrid, Harry said wearily. Are these legal? Of course they are. Wyverns don't get very big. These guys are already full grown. No need to worry. Out now there. Hagrid finally managed to pull out one of the small, leathery winged dragons, but the sleeve to his arm was singed. At first, you'll notice the wyverns are a little bit more snake-like than a dragon, Hagrid began. And ain't he a beauty? He held up the blue wyvern for all to see. Other than its color, the wyvern was anything but a beauty. It had a head of a dragon with antenna-like tendrils curling from its jaw and ears. And its wings were dragon-like as well. The rest of its long, thin body was more serpentine than dragon. It had legs, but they were tiny and only seemed to serve the purpose of making the creature able to scratch. Its most snake-like attribute, though, were the eyes. They were definitely the eyes of a snake, but glowing red. They reminded Harry all too well of someone, and he felt a prickly sensation run up his spine as he looked at them. Wyverns are mischievous creatures, Hagrid continued. They tend to like cold, dark places and can be real pests on the lower floors of castles, dungeons, or even in basements. If you've ever been somewhere at night, say you're in a basement, and thought you saw a pair of red eyes, it's probably a wyvern. They tend to even get into muggle houses sometimes by mistake, but they don't stay for long because they prefer feeding off a lot of the items used in potions. We used to have a real problem with them here until Professor Snape took over the position of potions master. They're mean pests that can make a mess if not taken care of, but never, ever try to take care of them yourself unless you know what you're doing. The wyvern he was holding suddenly let out a puff of blue flames that caught Hagrid's other sleeve on fire. He rather swiftly put it back into the crate with the other wyverns while the Slytherins laughed. The rest of the class was spent reading what their textbooks had to say on wyverns, and ended early so that Hagrid could tend to his burns. Harry, Hermione, and Ron followed him to his hut. "Good to see you all again," said Hagrid, opening a jar full of strange-colored cream. "You want some jelly tarts?" He motioned to a plate on the table with some blackened dollops of dough. "Thank you, but we're going to lunch soon," Hermione said, swiftly declining that offer. "So how was your summer?" Harry asked. There was something that Harry wanted to ask all summer since the end of the Triwizard Tournament. "Did you talk with the giants? Are they going to help us?" How'd you know about that? Dumbledore tell you?" Hagrid slowly began wrapping his left forearm with a bandage. "Well, I suppose you're smart, Harry. Yes, Madame Maxine and I talked with many over the course of the summer. Unfortunately, we didn't make much progress." "Are they going to be a threat?" Hermione asked anxiously. "Well, I can't say. You see, Hermione, giants tend to be a bit solitary folk. They ain't organized, so there's no way to speak for all of them at once. Maxine and I talked to all that we could, and there were some that seemed fairly certain that they wouldn't want to have nothing to do with Voldemort." This would be the first time that Harry had heard Hagrid use Voldemort's name. It was probably Dumbledore's doing. "We were able to get a few to help us, but on the whole, I don't think the giants will be on our side, nor will they be for him either. Maxine and I still have a lot of work to do." They were all silent after Hagrid finished. Then Harry asked, "Voldemort's here in England, right? How much trouble is he going to cause elsewhere? I was wondering if Hogwarts is the only place we would have to worry about him being right now." Hagrid frowned. "I wish that were true, but he's got followers elsewhere. You ever hear of Grindelwald?" They all nodded. "Well, he caused havoc, mainly in Germany, and no one thought much of it. But it wasn't long before he dragged the whole world into it. I'll tell you, Voldemort's got potential to be a lot worse than Grindelwald was." I heard this from Dumbledore. "But we'll have to keep our eyes and ears open outside of England and Scotland. The ministry's already been real particular about who they choose for a new headmaster at Durmstrang, talking about the school's reputation and all." "Speaking of Durmstrang," Hermione said suddenly, "what's with the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor? Why would Dumbledore choose someone from Durmstrang?" "Or another Snape," Ron added. Also, I feel like Hagrid's never had this much information for them ever.
Well, I feel like he always has had a lot of information.
Just not this willingly given it.
Right. He gave that up way too easy. Like,
Yeah.
even first year Hagrid was like, "Oh, I shouldn't have said that."
Yep. "Well, I'm not the one to be questioning Albus Dumbledore," Hagrid began, "but I remember that the greasy grit Severus' shadow he was." "I take it you don't care for him much," Harry surmised. "No, Dumbledore seemed to think there was something in him, but there wasn't. Proved it when he dropped out of school in 5th year, got tangled with you-know-who, I mean Voldemort. And I know he was involved, came back to our side with Severus, but he was so bad that the ministry wouldn't hear of letting him go. They threw him in Azkaban.
Oh.
Took a month for Dumbledore to get him out. When he finally did get out, though, he was bitter, refused to cooperate with the ministry. Helped out his cousin Severus, but his business was a bit shady. I think Severus has covered up some of the things he did. I remember him in school. Never did or said much. Real quiet type. But when he did do something, it wasn't ordinary. It wasn't good. Suppose that's the reason he's here now, because Dumbledore and Snape were the only ones he thought he could turn to. Karkaroff was the only one who would hire him outside of Britain, except Crab Hill and Funk in the States, where I suppose they'd never heard of him. But he didn't keep that job for long. But believe me, he weren't going to hang around here. Heard that the first thing the new headmaster of Durmstrang did was fire that snake. Malfoy said something about him being named after Salazar. Is that true? Ron asked. Don't know, but Salazar's nickname throughout school was Draco. And he was like this with the Malfoy family, and Hagrid crossed his fingers. Both he and Severus grew up with Lucius, and if you ask me though, if Lucius named his son after Salazar, he couldn't have picked a better person. Shame to teach students who you know will be using dark arts when they leave, he said, shaking his head. I have a question, Hermione said slowly. If he worked for Voldemort, then how come he's so young? He looks no older than some of the 7th years. This was true, and both Harry and Ron looked to Hagrid for an answer. Well, Hagrid thought, he's only 2 years younger than Severus. I suppose it's powerful dark magic. I don't know what else it could be. None of this talk did anything to brighten their spirits, so they all turned the subject towards Hagrid's newest pets. It was only when he invited them to come help put the wyverns in their new home, a cold cage he built into the ground, that they decided to head back to the school for lunch. End of chapter 2.
End of episode 1. Well, technically episode 21.
Yeah. I feel like this is going to be a good story.
I know, I'm digging it. I'm excited.
It's going interesting places.
It is going real interesting places.
I did not super love Hagrid's kind of rant there at the end. But,
Yeah, me either, because, like, what the hell, man?
Yeah, but, I mean, it was still good.
Yeah.
It was good.
I love their name for the American Wizarding School.
It's great.
I really want to know where they got it.
I don't know. It does seem like a very, like, American name, though.
It does. It really, really does. But I also always assumed that the American Wizarding School was going to have some weird Native American name up until before Ilvermorny was done. I always thought it was going to have some kind of Native American name.
Yep.
Because,
Yep.
they were here before any of us, and they'd be the ones who have the magic first.
Yeah.
I mean, so many, and it would clearly be in the New England area. I mean, why would it not? The deepest history of magic, I feel like, comes from the New England area in the United States.
Oh, yeah.
And so many of our towns and rivers and cities are either English or Native American.
It's true. Yeah, I feel like looking back on it, I'd always assumed that it was going to be like a Native American named school or like something like really like...
Colonial.
Yes. Like what they settled on.
Yeah.
Crook Hill and Funk.
Yeah. Yeah. I do like that she actually did put the school in Massachusetts, though.
Mm-hmm.
Western Mass, but still Mass.
It would be here.
It would totally be here.
All right, anything else you want to talk about?
No, I think that's it.
All right. We hope that you all had a great, safe Christmas and New Year season. And
Yes.
we're excited to be back reading you more stories again.
I know. Welcome to the new year. New story.
Woo! Thank you so much for joining us on our journey through the trap door.
Please leave us a review on Facebook or iTunes. It would literally mean the world to us.
It really would.
You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Through the Trapdoor 16 or on Twitter at The Trapdoor.
And please send us an email at throughthetrapdoor16@gmail.com with any story suggestions. And as always, join us again next Saturday as we travel through the trapdoor.